You are making your enemies and your player characters wrong. Why am I saying that? Well, let's just keep this case. You are an indie developer and you decided to make another game. In this game, there's going to be enemies that you're going to fight. You're also going to control a character that's going to go around the world, or maybe he's static and things come at him. So how are you going to program that? Well, you probably what are going to do is going to make you're going to make your game object or your pawn or whatever a player character. Okay, and this player character is going to have an HP value. It's going to have a damage value, probably. It's going to have a max XP. Maybe we're going to add levels to these characters so we can adjust difficulty, or maybe for progression, for later customization, or maybe a crafting system that we're going to add to the game or something like that. So we're going to add that also, a level. This is fine right now because we only have one character. Now let's go and design the enemy. And the enemy is also going to have an HP. It's also going to have a damage that is assigned to it. It's going to have also a max HP. We don't know what's the maximum health of this enemy. Maybe it can regenerate, so we're going to add also a max HP. And that's it. We're not going to add a level. We could also add a level to the enemy, but we're not going to for this example. And what is wrong with this right now? Right now, we have repetition. So you have two objects that basically have the same amount of parameters, the same interface, and it's separate. It's not coming from a base object that aligns and that defines these properties that are common for characters that are going to be on your scene. So what we can do to improve this is make a base object. Now let's make a base that is just going to be called a character. Now a character is going to have an HP. It is also going to have a max XP, HP, and it's also going to have a damage built in, the damage that this character can do. This is pretty much almost every parameter we need for both for the enemy and both for the player. What we can do now is a child object, inheritance. Basically, let's do inheritance in here, and you can use inheritance on anything, honestly. In this case, it's pretty useful. Why? Because most of these things are going to act in a way that is pretty similar but not the same. The player is going to be controlled by you, and the enemy is going to be controlled by an AI. So we're going to separate those two things, but you have to realize that both of these things have a common interface. They have an HP. They probably have a function to shoot, a function to move. They have the damage point that they are going to deal. So what we can do is another object, a child object that inherits from character, and this is going to be player. Now player, the only thing that we're going to add for this example is a level. Player has a level, and that's it. Now specific for player has an HP, a max health, a damage points, and a level, integer or whatever you want. Now for the enemy, you can also do the same. Let's say that the enemy needs to be connected to some object that is the AI, for example. So that's pretty simple. The enemy is going to share this interface over here, but it's going to have whatever you want that is specific to the enemy to it. So for example, let's say that an enemy has a drop table, a loot table. And what is that loot table? So that's going to be something specific for the enemy. So the enemy is going to have an array that is going to be the root table. And that's specific for the enemy. Now, as we can see, we avoided repetition here. We only written once the HP and max HP and damage points, because that's shared between all characters that are going to be on the scene. Every character is going to have an HP, a max HP, a damage that it can deal with, and all that. Then, specific to the player, is going to have a level that we can then do whatever we want with it. And specific to the enemy is going to have a loot table, for example. Now, this applies to Unity, Unreal Engine, to your own game engine, to whatever. This can be applied on anything. Now, some of you that are more experienced could also say, well, what if I want to make the specifics of a player or an enemy a component? You can also do that. You can have a base component for a character, which is basically what we did for the parent in here, and then we can make it so the child objects reference this parent component. In that case, it's almost like inheritance, but if we are going to draw basically how it would work, the parent will be this, and then things would connect to it instead of being the parent. We could say that this is a game object, and in the game object we have the character, the base, and then we have the player component. And player component can reference the other component that is the base. You could also do that. That's perfectly fine. The point of this video is to tell you that please extract and make this component like abstractions and avoid rewriting the same code for almost everything. Now, for example, what we can do also is make another child of enemy, and let's say that this enemy is going to have I don't know, it's going to be a boss, but it shares a couple of things with enemies. Now, the perk that you have now building the boss class under enemy is that every logic that you're going to build on enemy, it's also being applied on any class, on any object that is a boss. So you have this benefit that you already have half of the work or almost all the work done. For example, the boss is going to act in a certain way, but you can, if the states that is using are the same of enemy and you're not changing any of that state, and there's nothing weird to it on how it receives damage, for example, you already have a boss that from the start already has implemented how to receive damage, how to lose health, how to attack a player, or at least the functions that are necessary for that. So you can see how we can extract this. Now we can make another subclass, we can make another child of boss, which is going to be whatever you want, whatever your game design has, and you can keep going with this. Same with player. Maybe we want to make something that is very specific to the player, but we're only going to use it on certain scenes. You can also do that, or you can make an entire new character and then implement it. That's a new character. That could be maybe an NPC or whatever like that. So you can see that it's not that hard, and we are basically avoiding repetition, code repetition. For the NPC, we're going to make something specific for that, like for example a call to interact with it, that it's only going to be used on NPCs or something like that. Now we can see in this example of a game that I'm currently making with a couple of friends, we have a character controller that is a game object. Basically, we're using Unity. Almost everything that needs to be displayed on the screen needs to be a mono behavior. Now I have gameplay object because in my case character controller inherits from gameplay object. We have a couple of flags that are then used for a couple of things, but this comes from a mono behavior. So again, I am even using another instructive, you know. In this case, character controller has a couple of things in common. It has the rigid body reference. It has the amount of bullets, the maximum bullets, if it's infinite, the amount of bullets that it has, maximum velocity, current velocity, the minimum velocity, the max health that it has, the health that it has, a couple of events like it got hurt, it is shooting at someone, it is dead, so the UI or other systems can subscribe to those events and then proceed. And if we go to my player controller, there is a character controller. We can see that all of that is almost gone. These are all the variables and properties that I have in here. The scale, max scale, the steps or scale, because in this game, once you are losing, every time that you get hurt, the scale of the player is going to get smaller. So that specific thing that the player is going to have, you're going to put it on the player controller, not necessarily on the character controller. And that's why in the player controller we have the scale, max scale, and whatever. And if we go to the enemy controller, I have cooldowns. So it's not shooting at every frame, it's shooting at an interval of seconds. Also, it's going to have a reference to the player, although I wouldn't make this now, but I will make it in a different way. Same with this. This is very prototypey, not final. But you can see the point. You're basically removing the need to rewrite everything all the time. So if we go to the game and we select the player controller, we can see that we have all these things. We even have the flags that are something that comes from the gameplay object that I made, that is basically everything that can be interacted with. It is a gameplay object. So it has that, it has the health, max health, and whatever, and it is a player controller. Now if we go to an enemy, like this one, and select it, we can see that it has the same parameters. So it is pretty useful for this, basically. So if you're going to make a new character or whatever, you can apply it to anything, basically anything. In UI, it's also very useful doing this, but in the case of characters, it's basically how Unreal works by default. You make a character and then you make a controller, and the controller can be placed in a character so it can be used, that character. So it has this component system. Basically, it's not inheritance per se, but it is like a component system that Unreal has. In the case of Unity, we don't have that. Everything is like a component, so we can make it whatever way we want. But I recommend it like this because it just you grab one script and just throw it in there and it works. It's on one place, it's not on a couple of places. Well, this is all I have to say. Basically, please do this for your games. I play a lot of indies and it's pretty damn obvious when an indie it's poorly written. For example, an enemy that is one type works one way and the other one that should work the same way, it's not working the same way because it's basically rewritten. It's not using the same base for as an enemy or something like that. It is pretty stressful because as a programmer, as an engineer, I see it and it's damn obvious for me. But not everyone is an engineer, and not everyone has years of experience programming, and probably people that are indie, maybe it is a passion project, it's their first project, something like that. So please keep this in mind, and it's going to make working on your game much easier, in my opinion. It's always been easier for me doing it this way. And that's it. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter, follow me on LinkedIn, whatever. And let's see, I'll see you sometime.